The camera pans across a suburban street at dusk. Warm lights glow from windows, and the faint sound of laughter carries through the cool evening air. The focus lands on a modest, well-kept home at the end of the street. Inside, a man named Mark is sitting at the kitchen table. He's in his mid-30s, with a well-worn button-up shirt that suggests he just got off work. His hair is slightly disheveled, and his eyes carry the weight of someone who hasn't had a restful night in weeks. Across from him, his wife Anna is scrolling through her phone, her fingers tapping lightly against the screen. Mark watches her, his face unreadable, but there's a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe suspicion, maybe sadness. Anna doesn't notice. She's in her own world, smiling faintly at whatever she's reading. Their kitchen is cozy, filled with little touches of a life they've built together. Photos on the fridge, a calendar marked with dates of past family dinners, and a vase of fresh daisies sitting on the counter. Mark clears his throat. "Everything okay?" he asks. Anna glances up, startled for a moment, before offering a quick smile. "Yeah, just work stuff. Emails." "Late for emails, isn't it?" Mark's tone is light, but the question lingers in the air longer than it should. Anna shrugs and sets her phone down, face down on the table. "You know how it is. Deadlines." Mark nods slowly, but something about the way he looks at her suggests he doesn't entirely believe her. He takes another sip of his coffee and shifts his gaze to the window, watching the streetlights flicker to life outside. Mark and Anna have been married for 10 years. To anyone looking from the outside, they have the kind of life most people envy. A comfortable home, steady jobs, and the sort of relationship that seemed unshakable. At least, that's how it used to feel. Lately, though, things had changed. Not in an obvious way, but in those subtle, almost imperceptible shifts that are easy to ignore until they're impossible to avoid. Anna, once animated and full of energy, has grown quieter over the past few months. She's distracted, always on her phone or stepping out for phone calls that she insists are work-related. Mark, on the other hand, has become more watchful, paying attention to things he never used to notice. The way Anna seems to smile more at her screen than she does at him. How she's started working late more often, even on nights when there's no apparent deadline. Mark doesn't say anything about it, not yet. He tells himself it's probably nothing. Stress, maybe. Everyone gets busy sometimes. But deep down, there's a nagging voice that keeps him up at night, whispering that something is off. The following day, Mark decides to leave work a little early. It's a Wednesday, and the office is unusually quiet, so he figures it won't hurt. He tells himself he just wants to surprise Anna, maybe take her out for dinner. They haven't had a proper date night in months. As he drives home, he rehearses what he'll say, imagining her surprise when she sees him walk through the door earlier than usual. When Mark pulls into the driveway, he notices Anna's car is already parked. That's strange. She usually doesn't get home until much later. He feels a flicker of relief, thinking maybe she's taken the evening off. But as he steps out of his car, he hears laughter coming from inside the house. It's faint, but unmistakable. A man's laughter. Mark freezes for a moment, his hand resting on the car door. His heart begins to pound, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He tells himself it's nothing, maybe the TV or a phone call on speaker, but even as he tries to reason it away, he knows he won't be able to shake the feeling until he finds out for sure. He unlocks the door and steps inside. The house is quiet now, but there's a tension in the air that wasn't there before. He walks through the hallway, his footsteps slow and deliberate. When he reaches the living room, he finds Anna sitting on the couch, her laptop open in front of her. She looks up, startled. "Mark, you're home early," she says, her voice a little too bright. "I thought I'd surprise you," Mark replies, his eyes scanning the room. Everything looks normal, no sign of anyone else, but he can't shake the feeling that something is off. "Heard some laughing when I got here. Was someone over?" Anna's smile falters for the briefest moment before she shakes her head. "Oh, That must have been me. I was watching a funny video. She gestures to her laptop as if to prove her point. You know how those cat videos get me. Mark nods, but he doesn't say anything. Instead, he sits down on the armchair across from her, watching as she fidgets with the hem of her sweater. It's a small, nervous gesture he hasn't seen her do in years. You okay? He asks. Of course, Anna says quickly. Why wouldn't I be? Mark shrugs. I don't know. You just seem different lately. Anna laughs, but it's forced. I've just been busy, that's all. You don't have to worry about me. Mark doesn't respond. He leans back in the chair, his eyes fixed on her, but she avoids his gaze. After a few moments, she stands up and announces she's going to make dinner. Mark watches her leave the room, the uneasy feeling in his chest growing stronger. Over the next few days, Mark starts to notice more little things that don't add up. Anna's phone, which she used to leave lying around the house, is now always with her, tucked into her pocket or face down on the counter. She started dressing a little nicer for work, wearing perfume she hasn't touched in years. And then there are the phone calls, always quick, always just out of earshot. Mark tells himself he's being paranoid, that he's reading too much into things. But the voice in his head keeps getting louder, and one evening, when Anna leaves her phone unattended for just a moment, he finds himself reaching for it. He knows he shouldn't. He's never been the kind of person to invade someone's privacy, especially not Anna's. But as his fingers hover over the screen, the thought of what he might find feels both terrifying and impossible to resist. The phone lights up, and there it is. A message from someone named Ben. It's not overly incriminating, just a quick, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow," but it's enough to make Mark's stomach drop. He stares at the screen, his mind racing. He wants to believe it's innocent, but the pieces are starting to come together in a way he can't ignore. When Anna comes back into the room, Mark quickly sets the phone down, his heart pounding. She doesn't notice, too busy rummaging through her bag for something. Mark watches her, a million questions swirling in his head, but he doesn't say anything, not yet. That night, as they lie in bed, Mark stares at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Anna is curled up next to him, her breathing steady and peaceful. He feels a pang of guilt for even thinking she might be hiding something. But the doubt is there, and it's not going away. He knows he can't keep ignoring it. One way or another, he's going to find out the truth. Mark spent the next few days in a fog of suspicion and uncertainty. He couldn't shake the image of Anna's phone lighting up with that message from Ben. It was like a splinter lodged deep in his mind, impossible to ignore. He found himself watching her more closely than ever before, trying to piece together the puzzle without confronting her directly. Confrontation. No, he wasn't ready for that yet. Not until he had more than a vague feeling and a single text. One evening, Mark came home to find Anna already in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot of pasta sauce. She looked so normal, so casual, that Mark felt a pang of guilt for doubting her. Maybe he really was just being paranoid. Maybe Ben was a work colleague or an old friend. But then again, why hadn't she ever mentioned him? Smells good, Mark said, forcing a smile as he leaned against the counter. Anna glanced over her shoulder, her expression bright. It's your favorite, bolognese. Thought I'd treat you after your long week. Mark nodded, but he couldn't help noticing the faint trace of perfume in the air, a scent she hadn't worn in years. Big meeting today? He asked casually. Anna hesitated for the briefest moment before answering. Oh, just the usual. You know how it is. The unease in Mark's chest tightened. It was such a small pause, but it spoke volumes. He watched as she turned back to the stove, her movements quick and practiced, and felt the growing weight of everything left unsaid between them. Later that night, as Anna showered, Mark sat alone in their bedroom, staring at her phone where it lay on the nightstand. He didn't want to do it, didn't want to cross that line, but the urge to know the truth was too strong. With a deep breath, he unlocked the phone, grateful she hadn't set up a passcode. The messages from Ben were all there, a string of casual exchanges that didn't seem too damning at first glance. But as Mark scrolled, the tone began to shift. They weren't just friendly messages. There were inside jokes, shared memories he didn't recognize, and then the kicker, a photo of Anna smiling over a coffee cup, clearly taken recently. Mark's hands shook as he put the phone down, his heart racing. This wasn't just his imagination. Something was happening. Something that Anna had deliberately kept from him. He didn't know what hurt more, the possibility of betrayal or the realization that she didn't trust him enough to tell the truth. The next morning, Mark decided to take action. He couldn't keep living in this state of limbo, questioning everything but never getting answers. He hired a private investigator, a discreet and professional woman named Claire, who assured him she'd get to the bottom of things. It felt strange, almost surreal, to take such a drastic step. But Mark told himself it was necessary. He needed the truth, whatever it might be. Over the next week, Claire sent him updates. Photos of Anna meeting Ben at a small cafe, walking together through a park, and even entering what appeared to be Ben's apartment. Each image was a knife to the heart, confirming what Mark had feared but hoped wasn't true. He couldn't ignore it any longer. Anna was seeing someone else. When Claire delivered the final report, Mark sat in his car for a long time, staring at the folder in his hands. He thought about their wedding day, the vows they'd made, and the life they'd built together. He thought about the nights they'd spent dreaming about the future, the plans they'd made for a family, and the quiet moments of comfort they used to share, and now, it all felt like a lie. That evening, Mark confronted Anna. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as usual, when he walked into the living room and dropped the folder onto the coffee table. Anna froze, her face pale as she looked at the folder, and then back at Mark. "What's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You tell me," Mark replied, his tone cold. "I think you already know." Anna hesitated for a moment before reaching for the folder. As she flipped through the photos and notes, tears welled up in her eyes. She looked up at Mark, her expression a mixture of guilt and fear. I can explain," she stammered. "Go ahead," Mark said, crossing his arms. "I'm listening." Anna took a deep breath, wiping her eyes as she tried to compose herself. "It's not what it looks like," she began. "Ben is just a friend, someone I've been confiding in. Things have been hard between us lately, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it." Mark raised an eyebrow. "So you turned to him instead of me? You let him into our marriage while shutting me out?" Anna shook her head, her voice breaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," Mark said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You hurt me, Anna. You betrayed me, and for what? What does he have that I don't?" "It's not about him," Anna insisted, her tears falling freely now. "It's about us. I felt like we were drifting apart, like I was losing myself in this life we built. Ben was just someone who listened." Mark stared at her, his anger and pain bubbling just beneath the surface. "And what about me? I've been here, Anna. I've been trying, even when things got hard. But you didn't give me a chance." Anna looked down at her hands, unable to meet his gaze. "I know. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. A terrible, selfish mistake." Mark didn't respond right away. He sat down on the armchair across from her, his head in his hands as he tried to process everything. Part of him wanted to scream, to lash out, to make her feel the same pain she'd caused him. But another part of him, the part that still loved her despite everything, just felt empty. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Mark said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I even want to try." Anna sobbed, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. "Please, Mark. Please give me a chance to make this right. I'll do whatever it takes. Mark didn't respond. He stood up and walked out of the room, leaving Anna alone with her guilt and regret. Upstairs, he sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the wedding photo on the nightstand. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same. As you've been following this story, remember that trust is the foundation of any relationship. Betrayal is devastating, but it also teaches us about resilience and self-worth. If you're enjoying this gripping tale, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The days after Mark's confrontation with Anna were marked by a heavy, unbearable silence in their once warm and lively home. Mark had moved into the guest room, a clear indication of the chasm that now separated them. Anna tried to approach him several times, but each time she was met with his cold, distant gaze, a gaze that seemed to pierce through her, filled with a mixture of hurt and anger. Mark spent most of his time either at work or out of the house altogether. He needed space, he told himself, a chance to think without Anna's presence constantly reminding him of her betrayal. But no matter where he went, or how long he stayed away, the weight of what had happened followed him like a shadow. One evening, Mark was sitting at a bar downtown, nursing his second whiskey when his phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Claire, the private investigator. She had been digging deeper into Ben's background, at Mark's request, and the results were unexpected. Ben wasn't just some random guy Anna had met. He had a history, one filled with questionable dealings and a pattern of involvement in other broken relationships. Claire had discovered that Ben had been married once himself, and that his ex-wife had accused him of manipulation and emotional abuse during their divorce proceedings. There was more, though, something that made Mark's blood run cold. Ben had ties to a competitor of Mark's company, a competitor that had lost a major contract to Mark just over a year ago. Mark stared at the message, his mind racing. Was this more than just a personal betrayal? Had Anna unknowingly, or worse, knowingly, become a pawn in some sort of professional vendetta? The thought was almost too much to bear. He paid his tab and left the bar, the crisp night air doing little to calm the storm raging inside him. When Mark got home, Anna was waiting for him in the living room. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She stood up as he walked in, her hands clasped together nervously. "Mark, please," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" Mark set his keys down on the counter and turned to face her. "Talk about what, Anna? How you've been lying to me for months? How you've been sneaking around with a man who might not just be after you, but me too?" Anna's face fell, and she took a step back, visibly shaken. "What are you talking about?" Mark pulled out his phone and showed her the messages from Claire. "Ben isn't who you think he is. Did you even bother to find out who this guy really is before you threw everything we had away for him?" Anna looked at the screen, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. I didn't know," she stammered. "I swear, Mark, I didn't know any of this." Mark let out a bitter laugh. "That's the problem, isn't it? You didn't know because you didn't care enough to find out. You didn't care about how this might affect me, or us. You only cared about whatever it was he made you feel." Tears streamed down Anna's face as she tried to defend herself. "I made a mistake, Mark. A terrible, horrible mistake. But I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to destroy what we had." "But you did," Mark shot back, his voice rising. "You destroyed it the moment you chose him over me. And now I'm supposed to believe that you didn't know anything about who he really is. That you were just some innocent victim in all of this." "I wasn't thinking," Anna admitted, her voice breaking. "I was lost, Mark. I felt like I didn't matter to you anymore. Like I was just a part of the furniture in our life. Ben made me feel seen, even if it was all a lie. I know that now." Mark shook his head, the anger in his eyes giving way to something deeper, something closer to heartbreak. I mattered to you, Anna. Or at least I thought I did. But now, I don't know what to believe anymore. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Anna standing there, her sobs echoing in the silence. The next day, Mark decided he needed to confront Ben directly. He couldn't let this go any further without answers. Using the information Claire had provided, he found out where Ben worked and made his way to the sleek downtown office building. When Mark arrived, the receptionist informed him that Ben was in a meeting, but Mark insisted on waiting. He sat in the lobby, his leg bouncing with nervous energy, until Ben finally emerged. The man was tall, with a polished appearance, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. When he saw Mark, his smile faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. "Mark, right?" Ben said, his tone light but cautious. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "We need to talk," Mark replied, his voice firm. Ben gestured toward a private meeting room, and the two men stepped inside. As soon as the door closed, Mark turned to face him, his fists clenched at his sides. "What are you playing at?" Mark demanded. "What's your angle here?" Ben feigned innocence, his hands raised in mock surrender. "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," Mark snapped. "I know about your history, your ex-wife, your ties to that company that tried to undercut mine. Did you approach Anna because of me? Was this all just some twisted game to get back at me for something I didn't even know I did?" Ben's expression darkened, and for the first time, his mask of charm slipped. "You think too highly of yourself, Mark. Whatever happened between me and Anna had nothing to do with you." Mark took a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Then why her? Out of all the women in this city, why my wife?" Ben smirked, his confidence returning. "Because she was there, Mark. Because she was lonely and unhappy, and you were too blind to see it. I didn't force her to do anything she didn't want to do." Mark's jaw tightened, and he felt the urge to punch the smug look off Ben's face. But he held himself back. Instead, he leaned in, his voice filled with quiet fury. "Stay away from her, and stay away from me. If I find out you've so much as breathed in her direction again, I'll make sure you regret it." Ben didn't respond, but the look in his eyes was enough to tell Mark that the message had been received. Without another word, Mark turned and walked out of the office, his heart pounding. Back at home, Mark sat alone in the guest room, trying to process everything that had happened. The confrontation with Ben had given him some closure, but it hadn't solved the bigger problem, the rift between him and Anna. He didn't know if they could ever bridge that gap, or if it was even worth trying. Anna knocked softly on the door, her voice hesitant. "Mark, can I come in?" Mark hesitated before answering. "Yeah." She stepped inside, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. To fix us." Mark looked at her, his expression unreadable. "It's not that simple, Anna. You can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to go back to the way it was." "I know," Anna said, her voice breaking. "But I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be better, that we can be better." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to believe her, but the pain of her betrayal was still too fresh, too raw. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Anna. And without trust, what do we have?" Anna nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. But I'm not giving up on us, Mark. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust, even if it takes the rest of my life." Mark didn't respond right away. He stared out the window, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Finally, he turned back to her, his voice quiet but firm. "If we're going to try, it has to start with honesty. No more secrets, no more lies. Can you do that?" Anna nodded, her gaze steady despite her tears. I can. I promise. The uneasy truce between Mark and Anna held for a few weeks, but it was clear that their relationship was teetering on the edge. Every conversation, every glance, felt loaded with unspoken words and lingering doubt. Mark tried to focus on work and the few things in his life that still felt stable, but the weight of their situation loomed over him constantly. One evening, as Mark was coming home from work, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from an unknown number. He hesitated, a sinking feeling forming in his gut as he opened the message. You should know, she's still seeing him. Attached was a photo. Anna and Ben together at a park, sitting on a bench, their heads close as if deep in conversation. Mark's grip tightened on his phone as a wave of betrayal and rage surged through him. He didn't want to believe it. He'd given Anna the chance to come clean, to prove herself. But now, the cracks in their fragile reconciliation seemed to widen into a chasm. When he arrived home, Anna was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up and smiled, but her smile faltered when she saw the look on his face. What's wrong? She asked, her voice cautious. Mark didn't answer right away. He pulled out his phone, opened the photo, and set it on the counter in front of her. Anna's eyes widened as she stared at it, her face draining of color. Explain this, Mark said, his tone ice cold. Anna opened her mouth, then closed it again, at a loss for words. She took a deep breath, clearly trying to steady herself. Mark, it's not what it looks like. Don't, he snapped, his voice rising. Don't insult me by saying that. I gave you a chance, Anna. I told you no more lies. And this is what you do. Tears welled up in Anna's eyes, and she reached out as if to touch his arm, but he stepped back. Mark, please, listen to me. I met with him because I wanted to tell him it was over, that I couldn't see him anymore. Mark let out a bitter laugh. And you expect me to believe that, after everything? Anna's tears spilled over and her voice broke. I know I don't deserve your trust. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever fix. But I swear to you, I only met with him to end it. Mark stared at her, his anger and hurt warring with the small part of him that still wanted to believe her. If that's true, why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret? I was scared, Anna admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I was afraid you'd think the worst, that you'd leave me for good. I didn't want to lose you, Mark. You've already lost me, Mark said quietly, the weight of his words settling heavily in the room. You just don't see it yet. He turned and walked out, leaving Anna sobbing at the kitchen counter. That night, Mark found himself at Claire's office. He hadn't planned on going there, but he needed someone to talk to. Someone who wasn't involved in the tangled mess of his personal life. Claire listened patiently as Mark vented, her expression sympathetic but professional. I don't know what to do, Mark admitted, his voice heavy with defeat. I don't even know if I want to try anymore. Claire leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. You've been through a lot, Mark. And it's okay to not have all the answers right now. But whatever you decide, make sure it's what's best for you. Not her, not anyone else, just you. Her words stuck with him as he left her office and drove aimlessly through the city. He thought about the man he used to be, the man who believed in love, in trust, in the kind of partnership that could weather any storm. He wondered if that man was still in there somewhere or if he'd been lost for good. The next morning, Mark woke to find Anna sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked exhausted, her hair disheveled and her eyes red from crying. I know you don't want to hear this, she said softly. But I need to say it. I love you, Mark. I know I haven't shown it in the ways I should, and I know I've broken us in ways I can't fix. But I need you to know that you mean everything to me. Mark sat up, rubbing his face as he tried to gather his thoughts. Anna, love isn't enough. Not after everything that's happened. Love doesn't fix betrayal or lies. Or the fact that I can't look at you without wondering what's real and what's not? Anna nodded, her tears falling silently. I know, but I'm not giving up on us. Even if you hate me, even if you never trust me again, I'm going to fight for us. Mark didn't respond. He couldn't. Instead, he got up and went to the bathroom, leaving Anna alone with her determination. That evening, Mark received another text, this time from Claire. It was urgent, and it made his blood run cold. Ben's been digging into your work records. He's trying to sabotage your position. Mark felt a rush of adrenaline as he realized the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about his marriage anymore. This was about his career, his reputation, his future. Ben wasn't just a manipulative lover. He was a calculated enemy, and Mark knew he had to act fast. He called Claire, and together they devised a plan to confront Ben and put an end to whatever game he was playing. It involved exposing Ben's intentions, gathering evidence, and ensuring that his actions couldn't harm Mark's career or reputation. The confrontation happened the next day, in the very park where Anna and Ben had been photographed. Mark arrived with Claire, who had discreetly recorded several of Ben's incriminating conversations. When Ben saw them, he tried to play it cool, but the evidence against him was damning. You thought you could use my wife, my life to get back at me? Mark said, his voice steady but filled with barely restrained fury. Well, guess what? It's over. You're done. Ben tried to defend himself, but the proof was undeniable. Claire handed over the recordings to the legal team Mark had hired, ensuring that Ben's actions would have consequences, both professionally and personally. For the first time in weeks, Mark felt a sense of control, a small victory in the midst of the chaos that had taken over his life. But as he walked away from the confrontation, his mind turned back to Anna. The question still lingered. Was their relationship worth fighting for, or was it time to let go? At home, Anna was waiting for him, her expression hopeful but cautious. Mark sat down across from her, his face unreadable. I took care of Ben, he said simply. He won't be a problem anymore. Anna nodded, relief flickering across her face. Thank you. Mark leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. But this doesn't fix us, Anna. I still don't know if I can forgive you. Anna swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she replied. I understand, but I'll keep trying, Mark, as long as it takes. The tension between them was palpable, the weight of everything they'd been through hanging heavy in the air. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope, fragile, but real. Mark didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let himself be defined by what had happened. Whether he stayed with Anna or walked away, he would rebuild his life on his terms, one step at a time. Mark had thought confronting Ben and shutting down his schemes would bring some measure of resolution, but instead, it only seemed to heighten the emotional tension in his life. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the lies, the lingering questions about Anna's true intentions, felt heavier than ever. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover, more layers to peel back in this tangled web. At home, Anna tried her best to bridge the growing chasm between them. She made an effort to communicate more, to be transparent about her every move. She even handed over her phone to Mark, offering to let him see anything he wanted as proof of her commitment to rebuilding trust. But Mark couldn't bring himself to look. It wasn't about the phone or the messages anymore. It was about something deeper, something broken between them that couldn't be repaired with gestures or words. One evening, as they sat in the living room, the silence between them was deafening. Anna finally spoke, her voice hesitant but firm. I know you don't believe me, she said, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to really listen. Mark looked up from his spot on the couch, his expression guarded. Go ahead. Anna took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for a final confession. Ben wasn't just someone I turned to because I felt lonely. He was manipulative from the start. He knew exactly what to say, how to make me feel like I was the one in control when really, he was pulling the strings. Mark frowned, his eyes narrowing. You're saying he manipulated you? Yes, Anna said, her voice breaking. At first, it was subtle. He'd ask about our marriage, about you. He made it seem like he was just being supportive, like he cared about what I was going through. But over time, it became clear that he had his own agenda. He wanted to drive a wedge between us, and I let him. Mark sat back, processing her words. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I was ashamed, Anna admitted. Ashamed of how easily I let him into my life, how blind I was to his intentions. I didn't want to admit that I'd been so foolish. Mark shook his head, his frustration boiling over. Do you even hear yourself, Anna? You're saying you let some guy manipulate you into betraying me, into risking everything we had. How am I supposed to feel about that? Anna's tears began to flow, but she didn't look away. I'm not asking you to feel anything, Mark. I'm just trying to tell you the truth. I owe you that much. Mark stood up and began pacing the room, his emotions a storm inside him. He wanted to believe her, to believe that she had been a victim of manipulation and not a willing participant. But the scars of her betrayal were still fresh, and the idea of trusting her again felt impossible. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Claire. Mark picked it up, his voice tense as he answered. What is it? Claire's voice was calm but urgent. Mark, I found something you need to see. It's about Ben. Can you meet me? Mark glanced at Anna, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. Yeah, I'll be there. He ended the call and grabbed his jacket. I have to go. Mark, wait, Anna said, standing up. Whatever it is, please, just remember that I'm on your side now. Mark didn't respond. He walked out the door, the sound of it closing behind him echoing in the stillness of the house. Mark met Claire at her office, where she handed him a folder filled with documents and photos. As he flipped through the pages, his anger grew. It wasn't just about Ben's attempts to sabotage Mark's career. There was more. Ben had been systematically targeting people in Mark's life, spreading lies, planting seeds of doubt, and using Anna as a pawn in his twisted game. This guy's dangerous, Claire said. And it's not just you he's after. He's done this before, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants. Mark set the folder down, his jaw tight. What does he want? Revenge, Claire said simply. And from what I've gathered, he doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. Mark took a deep breath, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. He knew he couldn't let this continue. Ben had already done enough damage to his marriage, his career, and his peace of mind. It was time to put an end to it once and for all. The next day, Mark arranged a meeting with Ben at a neutral location, a quiet, empty cafe on the edge of town. Claire had helped him gather all the evidence he needed to confront Ben, and Mark was ready for whatever might happen. When Ben arrived, he was as smug and confident as ever, but Mark wasn't intimidated. He laid the folder on the table between them and slid it over. Go ahead, Mark said. Take a look. See how much of your little game I've figured out. Ben opened the folder, his expression darkening as he flipped through the pages. When he looked up, the arrogance in his eyes had been replaced by something colder, more calculating. You think this is going to stop me? Ben said, his voice low. You're just a stepping stone, Mark. You don't matter. Mark leaned forward, his voice steady and firm. I matter enough for you to spend months trying to destroy me. But here's the thing. You failed. And now, I've got everything I need to make sure you can't do this to anyone else. Ben smirked, but it was clear he was rattled. You don't have the guts. Mark held his gaze unflinching. Try me. Ben stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Mark didn't respond. He watched as Ben stormed out of the cafe, the weight of the confrontation settling over him. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of control, a sense that he was finally taking his life back. When Mark returned home, Anna was waiting for him in the living room. She stood as he walked in, her expression filled with nervous anticipation. "What happened?" she asked. Mark sat down, the exhaustion evident on his face. "It's over. Ben won't be a problem anymore." Anna let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. "Thank you." Mark looked at her, his gaze steady. "Don't thank me. This doesn't fix us, Anna. I don't know if anything can." Anna nodded, her tears glistening in the dim light. "I know. But I'm not giving up. Not on you. Not on us." Mark didn't respond right away. He leaned back, his eyes drifting to the photo on the mantelpiece, the two of them on their wedding day, smiling and full of hope. He wondered if they could ever get back to that place, or if it was lost forever. For now, all he knew was that the storm had passed, but the damage it left behind would take a long time to heal. Mark had barely begun to process the confrontation with Ben when his life took another unexpected turn. Just when he thought the worst was behind him, he received a chilling email from an anonymous sender. The subject line was simple: "You don't know the whole truth." Attached was a video file. Mark hesitated before clicking on it, his heart pounding. Something about this felt ominous, like stepping into a trap he couldn't see. The video began with grainy footage of Ben and Anna sitting in what appeared to be a dimly lit bar. It wasn't the casual setting of two acquaintances. It was intimate, their body language far too familiar. Mark's stomach churned as he watched them lean closer to each other, their conversation inaudible over the background noise. But then the video shifted, showing Ben pulling out his phone and showing something to Anna. Her expression turned serious, her hands gripping her drink tightly. The final seconds of the video showed her nodding, her lips moving as if she were agreeing to something. Mark rewound the video several times, trying to make sense of it. What had Ben shown her? What had she agreed to? The questions swirled in his mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Later that night, Mark confronted Anna with the video. She was in their bedroom, folding laundry, when he walked in, his phone in hand. "What is this?" he asked, his voice calm but deadly. Anna looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" Mark held up the phone, the video playing on loop, her face drained of color as she watched it, her hands trembling. Mark, I can explain," she stammered. "Then do it," he said, his tone sharp. "Explain why you were sitting in a bar with him, why you looked like you were plotting something." "It's not what it looks like," Anna said, her voice breaking. He said he had something on you, something that could ruin you." Mark's jaw tightened. "And you believed him?" Anna nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He said if I didn't meet with him, he'd go public with it. I didn't know what to do. I was scared." "What did he show you?" Mark demanded. Anna hesitated, her eyes filled with guilt. "I don't know if it was real, but it was an email thread. He claimed it was between you and someone at work, talking about cutting corners on a project. He said it would destroy your reputation." Mark's fist clenched as he tried to control his anger. "And instead of coming to me, you went to him. You trusted him over me?" Anna sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "I was trying to protect you, Mark. I thought if I played along, I could find out more and stop him before he did anything." Mark turned away, his mind racing. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was layered, tangled with lies and half-truths that seemed impossible to untangle. He needed answers, and he needed them now. The following day, Mark met with Claire again, showing her the video and relaying what Anna had told him. Claire's expression was grim as she examined the footage. "This changes things," she said. "If Ben's been fabricating evidence, it means he's more desperate than we thought. But it also means he's vulnerable. People who fabricate evidence leave trails." Mark leaned forward, his voice laced with determination. "I need to know the truth, Claire. All of it. I'm done being in the dark." Claire nodded. Leave it to me. I'll dig deeper. As Claire worked behind the scenes, Mark decided it was time to confront Anna again. Not with anger, but with an earnest attempt to get to the bottom of their broken relationship. He found her in the garden, sitting on the bench they used to share on quiet Sunday mornings. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. We need to talk, Mark said, sitting beside her. Anna nodded, bracing herself. I know. For weeks I've been asking myself one question, Mark began. Why? Why him? Why not come to me when you were struggling? Why let him into our lives? Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. I wish I had an answer that made sense, Mark. I wish I could tell you that it was all some terrible mistake, but the truth is, I was lost. I felt like I was disappearing into this life we built, like I didn't know who I was anymore. And Ben, he made me feel seen. Mark's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm. And now? Do you still feel seen by him? Anna shook her head, her tears falling freely. No, all I see now is how blind I was, how much I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. Mark looked away, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Anna, but I need to know. Are you still in contact with him? No, Anna said firmly. I ended it, Mark. I swear. He studied her face, searching for any sign of deception, but all he saw was raw, unfiltered regret. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe her, even if only a little. A week later, Claire delivered her findings. The email thread Ben had shown Anna was a forgery, carefully crafted to look authentic but riddled with inconsistencies. Claire also uncovered evidence linking Ben to a series of similar schemes in the past, targeting individuals, manipulating them, and using their weaknesses to his advantage. Mark felt a mix of relief and fury as he read through the report. Relief that his reputation was intact, that Ben's lies hadn't destroyed his career. But fury at the lengths Ben had gone to, the lives he had upended in the process. With Claire's help, Mark filed a formal complaint against Ben, backed by the evidence she had gathered. It was a calculated move, one that ensured Ben's actions wouldn't just go unnoticed, they would have consequences. The final confrontation between Mark and Anna happened on a quiet evening. They sat in the living room, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. It's over, Mark said, breaking the silence. Ben won't be able to hurt us anymore. Anna nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. Thank you. Mark sighed, his shoulders slumping. But this doesn't mean we're okay, Anna. There's still so much we need to work through. I know, Anna said, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Mark looked at her, his expression softening for the first time in weeks. If we're going to move forward, it has to be together. No more secrets. No more lies. Anna reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it on his. I promise, Mark. No more lies. For the first time, Mark allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but as they sat together in the fading light, it felt like the first step towards something new. The days that followed Claire's investigation and Ben's exposure were anything but calm. Mark felt like his life had become a minefield, every step charged with tension as he navigated the fragile terrain of his marriage. Meanwhile, Ben's retaliation loomed like a storm cloud. Though Claire had assured Mark that they had enough evidence to protect him legally, Ben was the type of man who wouldn't go down quietly. Mark could feel it in his gut. There was still another shoe waiting to drop. At home, Anna was trying, really trying, to bridge the gap between them. She had taken a leave of absence from her job, saying she wanted to focus on their marriage. Mark appreciated the gesture, but it was hard for him to shake the lingering doubt. Every moment they spent together felt like walking a tightrope. each conversation precariously balanced between hope and despair. One evening, Mark came home to find Anna sitting at the dining table, a stack of papers in front of her. She looked up as he entered, her face pale and her hands trembling. "What's all this?" Mark asked, setting down his briefcase. Anna hesitated, then pushed the papers toward him. "It's everything. My bank statements, emails, anything you might want to see. I want you to know that I have nothing to hide anymore." Mark stared at the stack, the sheer vulnerability of her gesture catching him off guard. He sat down across from her, his gaze shifting between the papers and her face. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," Anna said firmly. "If there's any chance of us moving forward, you need to know that I'm all in. No more secrets." Mark nodded slowly, appreciating the gesture but still unsure if it would be enough to heal the wounds between them. "It's a start," he said quietly. For the first time in what felt like forever, Anna smiled. A small, tentative smile that hinted at hope. Just as it seemed like things might be settling, a new development threw everything into chaos. Mark received an anonymous tip, this time in the form of a voicemail. The voice was distorted, but the message was clear. Ben had been digging deeper, and he had uncovered something he planned to release, something that could destroy Mark's reputation for good. Mark played the voicemail for Claire, who immediately sprang into action. "We need to find out what he has and how he plans to use it," she said. "If we can get ahead of this, we might be able to neutralize it." Mark's frustration boiled over. Why won't this guy just give up? He's already been exposed. What more could he possibly want? Claire frowned. For people like Ben, it's not about winning or losing. It's about control. As long as he thinks he can manipulate you, he'll keep coming. Mark clenched his fists, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He knew Claire was right. Ben thrived on chaos, and as long as Mark let him dictate the terms, he would never truly be free. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. One evening, as Mark and Anna were sitting in the living room, the doorbell rang. Mark got up to answer it, and there stood Ben, a smirk on his face and a folder in his hand. "What the hell are you doing here?" Mark demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Ben held up the folder. "Thought you'd want to see this before it goes public." Mark's heart pounded as he grabbed the folder and opened it. Inside were more fabricated documents, this time implicating Mark in a kickback scheme at work. The evidence was damning, if it were real. Mark knew it wasn't, but proving that would take time. Time he didn't have. Anna appeared in the doorway, her face pale as she took in the scene. "Ben, what are you doing here?" "Just tying up loose ends," Ben said smoothly. "Thought Mark should know what's coming." Mark stepped forward, his fury barely contained. "Get off my property now, and take your lies with you." Ben chuckled, clearly enjoying the chaos he was creating. "You think you can intimidate me? I've already won." Before Mark could respond, Anna stepped forward. "No, Ben, you haven't." Both men turned to look at her, surprised by the steel in her voice. "You've spent months trying to tear us apart," Anna said, her voice shaking but resolute. "And for a while, you almost succeeded, but not anymore. You don't have power over me, and you don't have power over us." Ben's smirk faltered, and for the first time, he looked genuinely unsettled. "You think some speech is going to fix this?" "No," Anna said, "but the truth will." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, revealing that she had been recording the entire conversation. Ben's eyes widened as he realized his threats and fabrications had just been captured on tape. Mark crossed his arms, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Looks like the tables have turned." Ben's bravado crumbled, and he turned to leave, muttering curses under his breath. As the door slammed behind him, Mark and Anna stood in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. The next day, Claire helped Mark and Anna hand over the recording to the authorities, along with all the evidence they had gathered against Ben. It was a decisive move, one that ensured Ben's actions would have serious consequences. As the legal process began to unfold, Mark felt an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time in months, it felt like the storm was finally beginning to clear. But the damage it had caused was still there, and he knew it would take time to rebuild. At home, Mark and Anna sat together on the couch, the silence between them no longer heavy with tension, but filled with unspoken understanding. "Thank you," Mark said finally, "for standing up to him, for choosing us." Anna looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I'll keep choosing us, Mark. Every day for as long as it takes." Mark nodded, the faintest hint of a smile on his lips. "Then maybe we have a chance." It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still scars, still doubts, still moments of uncertainty. But for the first time there was also hope. A fragile, precious hope that they could weather the storm together. As the aftermath of Ben's departure settled, Mark and Anna found themselves in the quiet eye of the storm. The battle with Ben had pushed them to a place where they could no longer avoid the raw reality of their relationship. They sat at opposite ends of the dining table one evening, a sense of fragile peace lingering between them. For the first time in months, they weren't enemies. But they weren't partners either. Not yet. Mark broke the silence first. "What you did today, standing up to Ben, it mattered. It showed me something I hadn't seen in a long time." Anna looked up, her eyes tired but hopeful. "And what's that?" "That you still care," Mark admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "For so long I felt like I'd lost you, like I didn't matter anymore. But today, I don't know, maybe I saw a glimpse of the woman I fell in love with." Anna's lips trembled as she tried to hold back tears. "I never stopped caring, Mark. I just got so lost in my own fears and mistakes that I forgot how to show it. But I see it now, and I swear, I'll never stop trying to fix what I broke." Mark nodded, but didn't respond. He wanted to believe her, to believe in the possibility of a new beginning. But the scars left by her betrayal were deep, and he knew trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. Meanwhile, Ben wasn't going down without a fight. Despite the evidence against him, he began spinning a new narrative, planting seeds of doubt in people's minds. He framed himself as the victim of a vindictive couple trying to silence him, using social media and subtle leaks to paint a picture of innocence. Mark's phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues and acquaintances asking about the rumors. His once steady reputation now felt like a house of cards, teetering on collapse. Even with Claire's guidance, the constant barrage was exhausting. One evening, Claire called with an update. "We've got him cornered, Mark. The legal team is moving forward, and the authorities are building their case, but you need to prepare yourself. Ben's going to try to take you down with him. People like him don't go quietly." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. What else can he do? He's already tried everything. Claire hesitated before responding. He hasn't gone after Anna directly. That might be his next move. Mark's heart sank. He knew Claire was right. Ben had already used Anna once as a pawn in his game, and there was nothing stopping him from doing it again. He needed to protect her, even if part of him was still struggling to fully forgive her. That night, Mark and Anna sat together in the living room, the weight of Claire's warning hanging over them. Mark told Anna what Claire had said, watching her reaction closely. Anna's face paled, and her hands clenched in her lap. "What does he want from us, Mark? Haven't we been through enough?" Mark reached for her hand, a gesture that felt strangely unfamiliar after everything they'd been through. He wants control, and the only way to beat him is to take it away. Anna looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "What can I do?" "Just stay with me," Mark said. "We face this together. No more secrets. No more running." Anna nodded, gripping his hand tightly. For the first time in months, they felt like a team again. The climactic turning point came when Ben made his final move. He leaked what he claimed was damning evidence of Mark's involvement in unethical business practices, complete with forged documents and a fabricated timeline. The story spread quickly, gaining traction among people eager for scandal. Mark's career hung by a thread, and his confidence in clearing his name was shaken. But Claire had anticipated this. She and her team worked tirelessly to dissect Ben's claims, uncovering the flaws and inconsistencies in his story. They also found new evidence, emails and texts that proved Ben had been planning this smear campaign for months, targeting Mark specifically out of revenge. As the evidence mounted, the tide began to turn. The media's narrative shifted, painting Ben as the manipulative villain he truly was. His credibility crumbled, and the legal system closed in on him. By the time the authorities issued a formal indictment, Ben had lost his power to harm Mark and Anna any further. On the day Ben's indictment was announced, Mark and Anna sat together in their kitchen, watching the news unfold on the small TV mounted above the counter. Anna reached for Mark's hand, her grip firm and steady. "It's over," she said softly. Mark nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. But as he looked at Anna, he realized there was still one more battle to face, the battle for their marriage. "Anna," he began, his voice tentative. "Now that this is behind us, where do we go from here?" Anna looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Wherever you want to go, Mark. I'm here. I'll follow your lead." Mark took a deep breath, the weight of their shared history pressing down on him. He thought about everything they'd been through, the love, the betrayal, the pain, and the small glimpses of hope that had emerged in the chaos. "I think we have a chance," he said finally. "But it's going to take work, a lot of work." Anna nodded, her tears spilling over. "I'm ready, Mark. Whatever it takes, I'm ready." Mark pulled her into a hug, the first real embrace they'd shared in what felt like forever. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't a resolution. But it was a beginning, a fragile, precious beginning. The final moments of the story find Mark and Anna sitting on their porch, the sun setting in the distance. They don't say much, letting the silence speak for itself. The battle with Ben is over, but the journey to rebuild their marriage is just beginning. As the camera pulls back, the image of Mark and Anna fades into the evening light, leaving viewers with a message of hope, resilience, and the power of second chances. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories that explore the depths of human emotions and the strength it takes to rebuild after a fall. As the dust settled from the chaos Ben had unleashed, Mark and Anna found themselves in a quiet, reflective place. The storm was over, but the landscape of their lives had been irrevocably changed. Ben's indictment marked the end of his reign of manipulation, and his smear campaign had been thoroughly debunked. Mark's reputation, though battered, remained intact, thanks to Claire's tireless efforts and the truth finally coming to light. But the battle with Ben had been only one part of their story. The real challenge, the one that mattered most, was rebuilding their marriage. In the days following Ben's downfall, Mark and Anna began the delicate process of picking up the pieces. They started with therapy, a space where they could confront their pain and begin to understand each other's perspectives. Mark admitted that he had grown complacent in their relationship, taking for granted that Anna would always be there. Anna, in turn, took ownership of her choices and acknowledged the pain she had caused. One of the first breakthroughs came during a therapy session, when Anna shared a memory from the early days of their relationship. "I remember the way you used to look at me," she said, her voice trembling. "Like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Somewhere along the way, I lost that." "I lost you?" Mark's response was equally raw. "And I stopped showing you that you mattered. I got so caught up in everything else, work, life, that I forgot to show you how much I loved you. I let the distance grow, and I didn't fight hard enough to close it." Those moments of vulnerability became the foundation for their healing. Slowly, they began to rebuild their trust. It wasn't easy. Mark still struggled with moments of doubt, and Anna wrestled with guilt that sometimes felt overwhelming. But for the first time in a long time, they were moving forward together. One evening, a few weeks after Ben's final downfall, Mark and Anna decided to revisit the restaurant where they had gone on their first date. It was a small, unassuming place, tucked away on a quiet street. But it held a special significance for them. As they sat across from each other, the candlelight casting soft shadows on their faces, Mark reached for Anna's hand. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" he asked. Anna smiled, a little shyly. "I said you were different from anyone I'd ever met, that you made me feel like I could be myself." Mark nodded. "And you told me you were afraid of getting hurt, but you were willing to take the risk." Anna's eyes filled with tears as she squeezed his hand. "And you told me I was worth the risk." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history filling the space between them. This wasn't about erasing the past. It was about honoring it, learning from it, and choosing to move forward. Months passed, and the rhythm of their lives began to stabilize. Mark and Anna fell into new routines, ones that prioritized their connection and communication. They took walks together in the evenings, cooked meals as a team, and made a point to express their gratitude for the little moments that made life meaningful. Mark also reconnected with his own sense of purpose. The ordeal with Ben had forced him to reevaluate his priorities, and he realized how much of his identity had been tied up in his career. He began to set boundaries at work, carving out time for the things that truly mattered: his marriage, his friends, and his own well-being. For Anna, the journey was about rediscovering herself. She returned to work with a newfound sense of clarity, but she also pursued personal passions she had long neglected: painting, yoga, and reconnecting with old friends. She no longer defined herself solely by her roles as a wife or a professional. She was learning to embrace herself as an individual. The final scene of their story takes place at a park near their home, a place where they often went to reflect and talk. It's a crisp autumn day. The leaves are a riot of orange and gold, and the air is filled with the faint scent of wood smoke. Mark and Anna sit on a bench, watching the children play on the nearby swings. Anna turns to Mark, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think we'll ever be the same as we were before?" Mark considers her question for a moment before answering. "No, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we're not meant to go back to who we were. Maybe we're meant to become something stronger." Anna nods, a small smile playing on her lips. "I like that." They sit in comfortable silence, their hands entwined, as the sun begins to set. The camera pulls back, capturing the quiet beauty of the moment. The two of them, together, surrounded by the vibrant colors of a new season. As this story comes to a close, it's a reminder that healing is never linear, and love is rarely perfect. But even in the face of betrayal and pain, there's hope for growth, forgiveness, and transformation. Mark and Anna's journey wasn't about finding their way back to the past. It was about building a future, one step at a time. Thank you for watching this emotional and thought-provoking story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories that explore the complexities of life, love, and resilience. See you in the next video.